Welcome to Alternatify, the channel where we twist the threads of history and unravel the tapestry of what might have been. Today we embark on a monumental thought experiment, one that reshapes not just a subcontinent, but the entire globe. We ask, what if Britain never colonized India? The British Raj, a period spanning nearly 2 centuries, was a complex, often brutal and undeniably transformative era. Its legacy is etched deep into the land, its people, and the very fabric of modern India. To imagine its absence is to contemplate a staggering void, a historical vacuum that demands filling. The implications of such a scenario ripple outwards, touching every corner of the world. We're not just talking about a different flag flying over Delhi. We're exploring potential new colonizers, a fundamentally altered Indian trajectory, and a modern world that would be almost unrecognizable. Imagine yourself as a merchant in 18th century Surat, the scent of spices heavy in the air, the clamor of trade echoing through the streets. Your life, your family's future, the very destiny of your nation hangs in a delicate balance. Would your world be better, worse, or simply different under another European power, or perhaps under no foreign power at all? The absence of British rule would not merely tweak history, it would fundamentally reroute the course of India, and, by extension, the world. The butterfly effect here is less a flutter and more a hurricane. The 18th and 19th centuries were a crucible of global competition, a relentless scramble for resources, trade routes, and imperial dominance. European powers, driven by ambition and economic hunger, cast their gaze across the world. India, with its immense wealth and strategic location, was an irresistible prize. While Britain ultimately prevailed, they were far from the only contenders. The French, the Dutch, and even the Portuguese had significant footholds and grand designs for the subcontinent. Each represented a distinct path, a different destiny for India. The French, for instance, were a formidable presence, particularly in the south, centered around Pondicherry. Their East India Company was a powerful rival to the British. A French-dominated India might have seen a different administrative structure, a distinct cultural imprint, and perhaps even a different lingua franca. Then there were the Dutch, masters of the spice trade, with trading posts scattered along the Indian coast. Their focus was primarily mercantile, driven by profit and efficient resource extraction. A Dutch India would likely have been a vast trading empire, meticulously managed for economic gain. And let us not forget the Portuguese, the first Europeans to establish a lasting presence in India, with Goa as their enduring bastion. Though their imperial star was waning, their initial zeal and strategic locations could have, under different circumstances, led to a renewed push for dominance. Let us delve deeper into these alternative colonial paths, beginning with the French. Figures like Joseph-François Dupleix harbored grand visions of a French empire in India, almost succeeding in challenging British supremacy. Had he received more consistent support from Paris, the map of India might have been painted in tricolour. A French India would likely have seen a more centralized administration, perhaps mirroring the bureaucratic structures of metropolitan France. French legal and educational systems could have been imposed, fostering a distinct intellectual and cultural landscape. The French language might have become the language of power and prestige, influencing literature and governance. However, this would not have been a benevolent rule. French colonial history, like all others, is marked by resource exploitation and a relentless focus on profit. Social unrest and resistance would have been inevitable as the colonizers sought to extract wealth from the colonized. The ideals of the French Revolution, liberty and equality, might have been preached at home but suppressed abroad. Next, consider the Dutch alternative, spearheaded by the formidable Verenigde Oostindische Compagnie, or VOC. This was a corporation with the power of a state, driven by an almost singular focus on trade and economic dominance. A Dutch India would have been a vast commercial enterprise, meticulously managed for maximum return. The Dutch would have invested heavily in trade infrastructure, ports, canals, and efficient shipping networks. Their influence would have been felt most strongly in coastal regions and along major trade routes. However, their concern for indigenous industries and the welfare of the Indian populace would likely have been minimal, superseded by ruthless business practices and exploitation. Culturally and religiously, a Dutch India would have presented a different picture. Coming from a predominantly Protestant background, their impact on India's diverse religious landscape would have been distinct from the Catholic Portuguese or the Anglican British. Their cultural imprint might have been less pervasive than the French, but their economic grip would have been ironclad. Finally, let us revisit the Portuguese, whose legacy in Goa offers a glimpse into a potential Portuguese India. Their initial arrival was driven by a potent mix of religious zeal and economic ambition. Had their power not waned, or had they found stronger allies, their influence could have spread far beyond their coastal enclaves. A Portuguese India would likely have seen a much stronger Catholic influence, with extensive missionary work and conversions. This could have fundamentally altered the religious demographics and social structures of various regions. The blend of cultures, as seen in Goa's unique architecture and cuisine, might have been replicated across a wider swathe of the subcontinent. Economically, the Portuguese would have focused on trade and resource extraction, much like their European counterparts. Their infrastructure development would have been geared towards facilitating this trade, often at the cost of local labor and resources. The cultural legacy, however, would have been a fascinating blend, a testament to centuries of interaction. But what if no European power had successfully colonized India? This opens up even more intriguing possibilities, starting with a potential Mughal resurgence. Imagine a modernized Mughal Empire, overcoming its internal strife and external pressures, consolidating its power. This would require strong leadership, military reforms, and economic strengthening. Such a revitalized Mughal state could have fended off European encroachment, maintaining its sovereignty and charting its own course. This scenario challenges the very notion of the inevitability of European colonialism, suggesting that a strong, unified indigenous power could have resisted the tide. Another fascinating non-European alternative involves the Russian Empire. With its relentless eastward and southward expansion, a Russian push towards India, perhaps through Central Asia, was not entirely inconceivable. This great game scenario, usually played out with Britain, could have seen Russia as the primary external threat. A Russian presence in India would have dramatically shifted the geopolitical landscape, creating a new axis of power and conflict. The cultural blend would have been unique, a fascinating fusion of Russian and Indian traditions, languages, and administrative styles. The world would have watched a very different kind of imperial struggle unfold. Without British colonization, India's political landscape would have been a complex tapestry of independent kingdoms and regional powers. Instead of a unified Raj, we might have seen a continuation of the Maratha Confederacy, the Sikh Empire, or powerful regional states like Mysore and Hyderabad. This could have led to greater regional autonomy, but also potential instability and internecine conflict. Economically, India might have developed its indigenous industries and trade networks more organically. Without the drain of wealth to Britain and the suppression of local manufacturing, India's economy could have followed a more balanced growth trajectory, potentially avoiding the devastating famines and deindustrialization witnessed under colonial rule. Socially and culturally, the absence of British influence would have meant the retention of many traditional structures and practices. While some reforms might have occurred organically, the blend of cultures, art, literature, and religious relationships would have evolved differently, free from the imposition of a dominant foreign culture. The English language would not have become the unifying administrative tongue. Globally, an uncolonized India would have forged different foreign policies, alliances, and relationships with other countries. It might have emerged as a powerful independent player on the world stage much earlier, influencing global politics and trade in unforeseen ways. The ripple effect of a world without the British Raj would be profound, starting with the global balance of power. The British Empire, often described as the largest empire in history, drew immense strength and resources from India. Without this jewel in its crown, Britain's global dominance would have been severely curtailed, leading to a more multipolar world much sooner. The Cold War, and the subsequent decolonization process would have unfolded very differently. India's role as a leader of the non-aligned movement was crucial. Without British rule, the entire narrative of post-colonial independence movements across Asia and Africa would have been altered, perhaps accelerating or delaying the process in other regions. The world economy would also be fundamentally different. Global trade patterns, financial systems and resource distribution were heavily shaped by the British Empire's control over India. A different economic system, with India as an independent economic powerhouse or a collection of regional economies, would have created entirely new trade relationships and global financial flows. In this alternative modern world, India's identity would be profoundly different. It might be a more fragmented nation, a collection of powerful regional states, or a unified, self-developed superpower. Its diversity, already immense, might have manifested in even more varied political and social structures. The question of prosperity versus instability remains open to debate. The relationships between global powers would also be altered. The United States and Europe would have navigated a very different geopolitical landscape. The rise of China, the dynamics of the Middle East, and the balance of power in Asia would all have been shaped by a different Indian reality. When weighing these alternatives, it's crucial to consider both potential benefits and drawbacks. On the one hand, the avoidance of exploitation, oppression, and the devastating famines caused by British policies would be a clear benefit. The preservation of indigenous cultures and the organic development of local economies could have fostered a more self-reliant and culturally rich India. However, the absence of a unifying colonial power might have led to greater fragmentation and instability, with regional conflicts potentially escalating. Modernization, in terms of infrastructure and industrialization, might have been slower or taken a different path. India could have remained vulnerable to other external threats or internal strife without a strong central authority. The outcomes are complex and multifaceted, dependent on countless variables. There is no simple answer, only endless possibilities for debate and speculation. The legacy of the British Raj, despite its undeniable negatives, also brought certain developments. Infrastructure like railways and roads, the establishment of modern institutions such as schools and a legal system, and the introduction of new technologies were part of this complex inheritance. Yet these often came at an immense cost. The systematic exploitation of resources, economic policies designed to benefit Britain, the suppression of indigenous industries, and the devastating famines that led to millions of deaths. The Raj was a period of profound suffering alongside incidental modernization. So we return to our central question. What if Britain never colonized India? The possibilities are endless, the implications staggering. This thought experiment reminds us of the delicate balance of history, how one pivotal change can reshape everything we know. What are your thoughts? Which alternative colonizer do you think would have had the most profound impact? Or do you believe India would have remained independent and unified? Share your theories in the comments below. Don't forget to like this video, share it with your fellow history buffs, and subscribe to Alternatify for more journeys into the past that never was. Hit that notification bell so you don't miss our next historical dive.